January 17th, 1940, Berlin, the Reich Chancellery. The mahogany table stretches beneath the glow of brass lamps, casting long shadows across folders stamped with eagle seals. Outside, snow falls silently on Wilhelmstrasse. Inside, the air smells of leather, cigar smoke, and certainty. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel leans over maps marked with red arrows, arrows that will soon sweep across Europe. Someone mentions America. The room stirs with polite laughter. One general waves a hand dismissively. "A nation of shopkeepers and jazz musicians," he says. "They build automobiles for housewives, not tanks for war." The laughter continues. The folders close, the lamps dim. The decision is made. America will not matter. They were wrong. In the years leading to 1940, the German High Command had studied America with the same cold precision they applied to everything else. They read reports. They reviewed production statistics. They analyzed the American economy and found it soft, decadent, divided by labor strikes and racial tensions. They saw a nation that had stumbled through the Great Depression, where bread lines stretched for blocks and factories stood silent. They saw a military ranked 18th in the world, smaller than Portugal's. They saw an army that trained with wooden rifles and trucks marked tank because real equipment didn't exist. And they concluded, with the confidence of men who had conquered Poland in weeks and France in months, that America posed no threat. It was a nation built for commerce, not combat. A society grown fat on consumerism, incapable of the discipline required for total war. This was not mere arrogance, it was calculated assessment. Germany had spent the 1930s transforming itself into a war machine. Every factory, every worker, every ounce of steel had been directed toward a single purpose: military dominance. The autobahns were designed for rapid troop movement. The Volkswagen was engineered to serve the state. German industry was lean, centralized, efficient, a blade sharpened for cutting. America, by contrast, seemed chaotic. Its industry was fragmented, driven by profit rather than national purpose. Its workers were unionized and unruly. Its government was weak, constrained by democracy's endless debates. The High Command believed that even if America entered the war, it would take years to mobilize. And by then, Europe would be locked under the swastika. But they misunderstood something fundamental. They mistook abundance for weakness. They saw the chaos of capitalism and failed to recognize its power. They looked at American industry and saw only refrigerators and radios, not the factories that could be retooled in months, not the engineers who had perfected mass production, not the workers who had built the modern world. They did not see Henry Ford's assembly lines where a car rolled off every 60 seconds. They did not see the shipyards of California, the steel mills of Pittsburgh, the aircraft plants spreading across Kansas and Texas. They did not see the sleeping giant, December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns, the giant wakes. What followed was not mobilization, it was transformation. Within weeks, factories that had produced automobiles began producing tanks. Plants that made washing machines began making artillery shells. A bicycle manufacturer started building rifles. A pinball machine company began producing armor-piercing rounds. The Chrysler Corporation built the Detroit Arsenal tank plant in 18 months, a facility so vast it covered 113 acres under a single roof. Ford's Willow Run plant, constructed in 1942, became the largest assembly line in history, producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes at its peak. Every 63 minutes, one complete four-engine heavy bomber rolling out of a factory in Michigan like loaves of bread from an oven. The numbers staggered comprehension. Between 1940 and 1945, the United States produced 300,000 aircraft. Germany and Japan combined produced 160,000. America built 88,000 tanks. It launched 5,000 cargo ships. It manufactured 2.5 million trucks, 12 million rifles, 41 billion rounds of ammunition. It produced more war material than all other combatants, Axis and Allied, combined. This was not merely industry. This was industry weaponized, the full force of American capitalism redirected toward a single goal. And the German high command, sitting in their bunkers beneath Berlin, reading reports that grew more impossible each month, began to understand their mistake. But the realization came in pieces, carried on the wind from distant battlefields. It came with the Afrika Korps, where Rommel's panzer crews counted American Sherman tanks rolling across the sand, hundreds of them, fresh and gleaming, while their own Tigers sat broken, awaiting parts that would never arrive. It came with the Luftwaffe pilots over Germany, who flew sortie after sortie against bomber formations so vast they blackened the sky, formations that returned day after day, no matter how many were shot down, because America simply built more. It came with the U-boat crews in the Atlantic, who watched American Liberty ships multiply like locusts, launched faster than torpedoes could sink them. 1 ship sank, 3 replaced it. 10 ships sank, 30 appeared. A German officer captured in Tunisia in 1943 was led past an American supply depot. He walked for 20 minutes through stacked crates, food, ammunition, medical supplies, spare parts, fuel drums, all marked with white stars. At the end, he stopped. He said to his captors through an interpreter, "We were told you were a weak people, obsessed with comfort, but you have brought your comfort with you. You have turned abundance into power." He gestured at the crates. "How do you fight a nation that can afford to ship ice cream to the desert?" He was referring to a real program. The US military, recognizing the moral value of small luxuries, had built floating ice cream factories, refrigerated barges that produced gallons of ice cream daily for troops in the Pacific. While Japanese soldiers starved on isolated islands, subsisting on handfuls of rice, American forces received regular deliveries of fresh food, Coca-Cola, cigarettes, candy bars. This was not cruelty. This was industrial capacity so vast that even war could not exhaust it. America fought the war without rationing gasoline until 1942, and then only to preserve rubber for tires, not because fuel was scarce. The German soldiers had expected to face an enemy like themselves, hungry, desperate, willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Instead, they faced an enemy that barely seemed inconvenienced. American troops ate 3 hot meals a day. They had clean uniforms, reliable weapons, and endless ammunition. When their equipment broke, it was replaced immediately. When they were wounded, they were evacuated by air to field hospitals stocked with morphine, penicillin, and whole blood. The Germans, by contrast, fought in tattered uniforms, fired rifles that jammed in the Russian winter, and watched their wounded die for lack of bandages. This contrast was not accidental. It was the manifestation of 2 different systems. Germany's war machine, for all its efficiency, was brittle. It depended on precision, on every component functioning perfectly. When the Allies bombed ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt, German tank production stalled. When Romanian oil fields were captured, the Luftwaffe grounded its planes. The system had no redundancy, no margin for error. America's system, born from the chaotic Xinjiang of free markets, was resilient. If one factory was destroyed, 10 others picked up the slack. If one supply line was cut, another opened. The decentralization that Germans had mocked as inefficiency became an unbeatable advantage. And there was something else, something intangible but undeniable. The German soldier fought for the fatherland, for orders, for survival. The American soldier fought for something larger. He carried it with him in his pocket. Letters from home, photographs of Main Street, a copy of Life magazine showing new cars and suburban houses. He fought not to conquer, but to preserve. He believed, however imperfectly, in the idea that every man deserved a chance, that prosperity was a right, not a privilege. This belief was printed on every ration box, every supply crate, every gallon of fuel. It was the message of abundance. We have so much, we can afford to give it away. By 1944, the evidence was undeniable. At Normandy, the Allies landed with such overwhelming material superiority that German defenders ran out of ammunition before the Americans ran out of men. In the Pacific, entire Japanese armies were bypassed, isolated, left to starve because America could afford to ignore them and move on. The strategy was brutal in its simplicity: outproduce, outlast, overwhelm. Do not fight the enemy's strength. Bury it under an avalanche of steel. Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, later wrote in his memoirs, "The war was decided by industrial capacity. We lost the moment America entered. Everything after that was merely delay." He described visiting a captured American supply depot in France and feeling a profound despair. "We could never match this," he wrote, "not in 10 years, not in 100. They had turned their entire nation into a factory, and the factory ran on principles we could not comprehend. Those principles were simple: innovation, standardization, mass production. Henry Ford had pioneered them in peacetime, producing Model T cars so cheaply that factory workers could afford to buy them. In wartime, those same principles produced weapons at a rate that seemed impossible. The Liberty ship, a simple cargo vessel, was designed to be built quickly and cheaply. The Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, reduced construction time from 244 days to 42 days. One ship, the Robert E. Peary, was completed in 4 days and 15 hours as a publicity stunt. 4 days, from keel to launch. This was the weapon the German High Command had not foreseen. Not a bomb, not a tank, not a secret technology. The weapon was the system itself, the American industrial machine, powered by abundance, driven by competition, sustained by the belief that more was always possible. In the spring of 1945, as Soviet and American forces closed on Berlin, a German officer stood amid the rubble of the Reich Chancellery. The brass lamps were gone, looted or destroyed. The mahogany table was firewood. The maps with their red arrows were ashes. He remembered the laughter in that room. Years ago, when someone mentioned America, he remembered the certainty. And now, standing in the ruins, he understood. They had mistaken the absence of militarism for the absence of strength. They had seen a nation of plenty and assumed it was soft. They had failed to realize that abundance was not weakness, it was power in reserve, waiting to be unleashed. The recurring symbol of that abundance, a simple green can, stamped with white letters, "C ration," became legendary. German soldiers starving in the Ardennes would risk sniper fire to loot American supply dumps for those cans. They contained more calories than a Wehrmacht soldier received in 2 days. Inside, meat, crackers, candy, cigarettes, instant coffee. The can itself was better made than German ration tins, which rusted and leaked. It was a small thing, a trivial thing, but it represented everything. A nation that could afford to feed its soldiers like this, that could ship millions of these cans across oceans without strain, was not a nation that could be defeated. The war ended. The factories retooled again, back to cars, refrigerators, radios. The workers went home. The arsenal of democracy became the engine of prosperity. And across the ocean, in the ruins of cities that had once mocked American softness, survivors sifted through the rubble and found among the debris a green can. Dented, empty, rusted, a ghost of abundance, a reminder of what they had failed to understand. The lesson was simple, brutal, undeniable. Never mistake prosperity for weakness. Never assume that a nation built on plenty lacks the will to fight. Because when that nation mobilizes, when it turns its full industrial might toward war, It does not merely compete, it overwhelms. It buries the enemy under the weight of production, the force of innovation, the relentless output of a system that thrives on challenge. The German High Command had read the maps wrong. They had studied the numbers and missed the truth. They had looked at America and seen softness when they should have seen strength sleeping. And by the time they understood their mistake, it was too late. The factories were running, the ships were sailing, the bombers were flying, and the giant, once awakened, would not stop until the world was remade in the image of its abundance. In the end, the war was not won by courage alone, or sacrifice, or ideology. It was won by the simple, staggering fact that one nation could produce more than all the others combined, and still have enough left over to send ice cream to the desert.